Good evening. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Gadi Schwartz coming to you from Los Angeles. And here's some of the stories we're watching tonight. Former President Donald Trump has arrived in New York, preparing to be arraigned in the city where he grew up. And all of this going down amid tight security and the threat of civil unrest, to which New York City's mayor has a warning.
Our message is clear and simple. Control yourselves.
And a string of deadly tornadoes rips through parts of the country, causing just about every kind of damage imaginable. Here's just one example. And the Virginia elementary school teacher shot by a 6-year-old blames his school district for missing a number of warning signs. She's suing for $40 million. And turns out that Chinese spy balloon that floated over the U.S. back in February might have actually done a pretty good amount of spying. We've got an exclusive report. And now, more than 50 years since astronauts went to the moon, a new crew from NASA is getting ready for another lunar flyby. We're going to introduce you to the crew, so stay tuned.
Prop, go. PD, go. Fight up, go. All right, go for launch.
Our destiny is always to go and see what's further and what's next.
And the stage is set for former President Trump's arraignment, which is expected to happen in New York City tomorrow. And that is where Trump is tonight. He left West Palm Beach around 12:45 this afternoon, getting into New York's LaGuardia Airport around 3:30. Now, the motorcade that took him to the Florida airport was accompanied by Secret Service, his campaign team, lawyers, and you can see Trump supporters all along the way as well. After landing at LaGuardia, his motorcade drove to Trump Tower, where another group of supporters was waiting for him. Trump giving a quick wave as he got out of the car. Now, Trump plans to spend no more than 24 hours in New York City. He says he'll surrender tomorrow morning, then appear in court for his arraignment in the afternoon, then says he'll head back to Florida, where he plans to give a speech tomorrow night. Trump is the first president in U.S. history to be hit with criminal charges, this case centering around hush money payments to a porn star. NBC News national correspondent Gabe Gutierrez joins us now. Gabe, there is no other way to put it. Tomorrow is going to be a massive spectacle, right? Security, protesters, supporters, the world watching. What do you think it's going to look like from the ground?
Hey there, Gadi. Well, spectacle is right. We just saw the beginnings of it today. Those crowds of supporters greeting the president as he left Mar-a-Lago. And as you laid out, president making here to New York City and spending the night in Trump Tower. Now, here's what we expect to happen tomorrow. Former President Trump is expected to be driven down here to Lower Manhattan, which is about 4 miles south of Trump Tower. And he's will come under heavy security. We have not been seeing many crowds here so far for the president. But there is a protest scheduled tomorrow around 10:30 in the morning, headlined by Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. Unclear exactly how many people show up, but the NYPD, of course, is on very high alert in case any of these protests get out of hand. Now, there's a heavy police presence, obviously, around Trump Tower, and there has been here in front of this courthouse where the former president is expected to be arraigned again tomorrow on the 50th floor, sometime we think around 2:15 in the afternoon Eastern time. Got it.
Hey, Gabe, some last-minute legal moves from Trump, right? Trump hired a new attorney today. His legal team filed a request to deny media cameras in the courtroom. Do you think that's likely?
Right. There's several things playing out in these last few hours before this arraignment. Yes, the Trump legal team added a white-collar defense attorney, Todd Blanche, a high-profile attorney. He's also represented Paul Manafort, the former president's campaign manager at one time. He was added to the legal team, or at least his appointment to the legal team was announced today. And yes, there is a legal battle playing out in between the group of media organizations who filed a petition to try and get cameras inside of this court hearing. Today, Trump's legal team filed a motion basically saying that they do not want cameras in the courtroom because they think it will contribute to, quote, a circus-like atmosphere. Now, certainly, Gadi, there's a lot of things that look like a circus here in terms of just how many media have already come here from around the world. You mentioned a spectacle in your introduction. That's also what we are expecting tomorrow. But at this point, the judge has yet to rule on whether cameras will be in the courtroom. Unlikely, though, in the past, he really hasn't been a fan of them. Gadi.
And Gabe, just looking at the planning and logistics after the arraignment, tomorrow there could be kind of a split screen, right? We know Alvin Bragg is going to be holding a press conference. Trump will head back to Mar-a-Lago, hold a rally there right around this time tomorrow night. What do you think we'll hear?
Yeah, that's right. The former president saying that he will deliver remarks at 8:15 Eastern time tomorrow night. But before that, just after the arraignment concludes, we believe, sometime around then, DA Alvin Bragg, who has been the target of many of Trump's verbal attacks on social media over the last couple of weeks, many of former president's supporters also making him public enemy #1, saying that this prosecution is politically motivated. DA Bragg is set to address questions about this prosecution really for the first time, definitely since it was announced. He's declined to comment over the last several weeks as this investigation, this grand jury investigation, really ramped up. The only time, he has spoken publicly has been in letters to Republican lawmakers on Capitol Hill who have asked him to testify as well. So we are expecting his first public comments on this tomorrow afternoon, again followed by the former president's comments on all of this tomorrow night. Gadi.
And Gabe, real quick, what is tomorrow going to look like when it comes to the processing and the arraignment? I understand he's definitely getting fingerprinted, but are we going to see a mugshot? Is he going to have to give DNA? How is all that going to work?
From what we understand right now, we do not expect him to get swabbed for DNA, but he will be processed. So we understand he will be fingerprinted in the back of the courtroom, again, on the 15th floor. It's still an open question, though, whether a mugshot will be taken. We just don't know at this point. Again, one of the many questions surrounding tomorrow, an unprecedented arraignment of a former U.S. president. Gadi.
Gabe Gutierrez on the ground for us. Thanks so very much. And let's bring in NBC News legal analyst and former federal prosecutor Cynthia Oxney. Cynthia, Trump posted on Truth Social that he wants a change of venue. This is something that we were talking about last week. Do you think that could happen? Do you think that he could see a change of venue outside of Manhattan?
Well, he could see a change of venue if the judge determines that by no fault of his own, it would be impossible for him to get a fair trial in Manhattan. His problem is the reason why there's a circus is because he is the circus manager. I mean, you can't jump up and down and call the DA an animal and look for death and destruction and post pictures with baseball bats to his head and say terrible things about the judge and how everything's unfair and create a circus around your arraignment and then say, oh, no, I can't get a fair trial because there's a circus. So unless things change dramatically, I would say, no, he's not going to get a change of venue.
His team also filed that motion today to bar the media from being inside the courthouse. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't think there will be cameras in the courtroom. That just doesn't really happen in New York. And I think you should be treated like everybody else. And since everybody else doesn't have cameras in the courtroom, I don't think there should be cameras in the courtroom. To the extent that we can normalize the process so that the rule of law applies to everyone equally, that's what I'm for.
Speaking of that, how is he going back to Florida after this arraignment instead of an arrest?
Well, nobody with an E felony of this type would be arrested and would go to jail pending trial. So, or he would even have bail. So it's not unusual. Now, what might be unusual is sometimes a judge would say, I'm sorry, you can't leave the state. I think that's unlikely because the point of all those bail provisions is to make sure the person comes back, to make sure we can find them, to make sure that they appear in court as required. Well, everybody knows where he is 24 hours a day. So there really isn't a problem with getting him back into court. As long as he says he's going to come back, I think the judge will take him at his word. And because there's no hiding, Trump can't hide. So I'm sure that he'll be able to go back and there shouldn't be a problem with that. I don't see a problem with it.
As a former prosecutor, what are you going to be looking for when this indictment is unsealed tomorrow?
Well, I'm really looking for two things. I'm looking for the structure of the felony, because as you know, the the felony has to be set up in a certain way. So I'm looking for exactly what the charges are. That's one thing. The other thing is I'm really hoping that we have a speaking indictment. And what that means is an indictment that lays out all of the facts that support the criminal charge. Ordinarily in New York, what you see is on X date, so-and-so committed X crime, and this is the violation. And there's not a lot of detail. If you had a conspiracy charge, or if you had a speaking indictment, which is more common in the federal system, but if you had that, you might lay out the facts on such and such a date. He met with Michael Cohen. He told Michael Cohen this. He said pay cash. There was an agreement. All of the details, whatever they are, that Bragg has been able to uncover, and the corroboration that he's been able to uncover for Cohen and for the statements that Cohen made, that could be in the indictment. And I'm hoping it is. If it's not, I'm hoping that they file a separate statement of facts to accompany the indictment so that we can find out what happens. And then, of course, Alvin Bragg has always said, after he makes a charging decision, he would explain to the American people exactly why he did it. And sure enough, there is a press conference following the arraignment. So we should learn something there as well.
Cynthia Oxney, we always appreciate your insight. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
New York City has been ramping up security across the board since the day Trump's indictment was handed down, prepping for protests and demonstrations. Even Republican Congresswoman and Trump loyalist Marjorie Taylor Greene is coming to New York for that protest tomorrow. Now, across the courthouse where Trump will be arraigned, there's even a flyer to advertise that protest. Earlier today, New York City Mayor Eric Adams talked about security preparations and had a warning for those making their way into the city.
While there may be some rabble-rousers thinking about coming to our city tomorrow, our message is clear and simple. Control yourselves.
And joining us now is former U.S. Secret Service Special Agent and author of Becoming Bulletproof, Evie Poumpouras. Evie, so obviously there isn't a precedence for this kind of thing. How would you say the Secret Service is prepared for all this, from transport, from Florida all the way to New York and back? And what could we see from the Secret Service tomorrow?
Well, this is going to be a collective effort. When you think of the U.S. Secret Service, think of them as kind of the lead or the overseers of all these pieces coming together. I think the dominant factor here is going to be the NYPD, quite honestly. They're the ones who are going to have that presence, those officers on the ground, making street closures, securing the area, and that's really where your heavy manpower is going to be. The idea with something like this is you want to push people as far out as possible. So you want to have control. The less variables and people moving through, the safer it is. So I think New York is quite prepared. I don't think we're going to see, you may have protesters, but I do think with the manpower, the mayor speaking out, they're prepared for this so that we don't have anything unprecedented happening. Yes, I understand that this is a very unique situation, which it is, but the U.S. Secret Service, this is what they do. They understand the factors that go into play. So you're going to have security above. The sky's going to be cleared out if need be. You're going to have security below, underground, the trains that pass through, subways. So when you think of security, you're going to think about it 360 coverage all over the place. And you want to just make sure he's moving in, because even in a scenario like this, you want to make sure he's safe and protected. Okay, there's a lot of people who have a lot of different opinions on both sides, so you just want to make sure that we're also protecting him against any lone actors, so to speak, as well. Now, with protesters, people are going to protest, but the NYPD and law enforcement, to include the Secret Service, they have people in there for those protests that maybe we don't know about. So they're always, this is something very commonly done, to have a feel at any protest that we don't know about, in any conversations of maybe things that they may do or may transpire. So they've probably got this covered completely all the way around.
And when it comes to the actual fingerprinting, from what we understand, there will be law enforcement in the room. There will also be Secret Service there just tasked with guarding him. How much collaboration is happening between what almost appear to be two separate sides?
I'm going to tell you this. The Secret Service is going to stay out of it. Their job is to protect and safeguard his life, to protect and maintain that perimeter and security. Now, what transpires within that justice system, the fingerprinting, whether or not they take a mugshot, whether or not, they do a swab, all the different things that are being discussed, the Secret Service's job is to step back and allow that to happen. So The court system is probably conversing with them. Not probably, they are. They're letting them know this is what we're going to do. This is what we're not going to do. The Secret Service cannot and should not intervene. They likely won't get involved in that because you have to allow the justice system to work as it's meant to be. As long as he's safe and secure, that is what they care about. Safeguarding his life, safeguarding also, think about it, the lives of the people there. You don't want anything to go awry. It's not just the former president's life. It's the people within the vicinity, the people in the courthouse, people around the courthouse. So that's really where their focus is going to be.
Former U.S. Secret Service Special Agent Evie Poumpouras, thanks so much for joining us. And at least 32 people are dead after tornadoes ripped through more than a dozen states over the weekend. It was a terrifying experience for thousands, including Kimberly Shaw, who was literally swooped up by one last Friday. Her phone recorded the whole thing. Take a look. That went by extremely fast, so we're going to walk you through what you just saw there. You see those hands on the door? That is Kimberly and her husband trying to keep it shut, and then within seconds, Kimberly is pulled outside. You can see that debris swirling all around her. You can't even tell what's up and down. Kimberly's husband managed to grab onto her and pull her back inside. You see his arm there around her. She says they were both hurt but are doing okay right now, and that was just one of the 50 confirmed tornadoes this weekend, seen across 15 states, including Tennessee, where a tornado hit the Pinckney's neighborhood in the middle of the night. Those are the Pinckneys. It took the life of the husband's mother and the walls around their home. And now that couple has to clean up what's left of their house, their mother-in-law's house, and plan a funeral, all while grieving.
When David's dad passed away, his mother was presented with the flag. He was in the Coast Guard. We had a service, and she brought the flag back home with her, and it sat in her living room in a case. And David really was trying to find it, and he said, it really means the world to me. She wanted it
at her funeral.
And they said, well, we'll do whatever we can to find it. And they did, and David was...
hours later.
Yep, overwhelmed.
Let's bring in NBC News correspondent Emily Akeda. Emily, we talked to you last week just after you guys had to take shelter when that tornado came through. What have you seen and heard since?
Well, Gadi, just about complete devastation everywhere I look. Here in the town of Wynne, Arkansas, especially. This is the result of an EF3 tornado that tore through. These were homes, believe it or not, completely reduced to rubble. I spoke with one woman just across the street there. She says when she emerged from her home after the tornado passed through, she actually didn't recognize her town. She got lost navigating through because there's just been so much devastation. And this isn't the only state that has really been recovering from such severe tornadoes. There were more than 50 confirmed tornadoes, more than 100 suspected tornadoes across more than a dozen states in nearly half of the country, Gadi. I spoke with the FEMA administrator. She was on the ground here yesterday. She described the magnitude of these sweeping storms as historic. I continue to speak with residents, and, you know, not only are we hearing devastating stories as we watch that death toll continue to climb, now at least 32 people killed from these the weekend storms, but we're also hearing about remarkable survival stories and acts of heroism. One family, the Lee family, they were inside just down the block from here, their home, when the tornado passed over, ripping walls off of their home. And immediately after the tornado passed, they heard yelling from their neighbor. They rushed over and helped pull a woman to safety. Here's more from the Lee family.
It's like, man, it was an experience. It was just unreal, something that you would normally see in a movie or something. It was just a lifetime experience, and I was just glad that we were all safe. Seeing just debris in places where things used to be that we knew from a long time ago, just seeing it not there anymore and not knowing that it's probably not going to get replaced is just devastating.
Homes flattened, cars flipped, roofs ripped off. The devastation so widespread in parts of Arkansas. Here in Wynne, schools have been canceled at least through the end of this week, Gadi.
And Emily, I know so many people in those communities are wondering what help even looks like in the long term. I know you've been spending a lot of time with FEMA. They say they're going to help, but what does that look like to you?
So we know that President Biden signed a major disaster declaration yesterday for the state of Arkansas. There are about several hundred members of both FEMA and the National Guard on the ground. The governor also taking several steps. She says that will, one, help push back the tax deadline for people in the state, also to provide paid leave for employees that have been impacted by the storms. But the cleanup process feels almost seemingly insurmountable, especially when you look around. And keep in mind, Gadi, just tomorrow, this time tomorrow, we could see almost a copy and paste of the storms we saw over the weekend. So people kicking those cleanup processes into high gear, salvaging what they can when they can, Gadi.
Before those next storms roll through. Emily, thank you so much. And as you just heard Emily say, we are not done with the storms this week. Another severe outbreak is expected tomorrow in the Midwest. NBC's Michelle Grossman has more.
Thanks so much. Great to see you. Yes, we are watching another spring system, a very powerful system getting its act together for the rest of tonight and then really taking shape tomorrow. It's going to get better organized on the backside of the system. We're looking at blizzard conditions in North Dakota, South Dakota, even in portions of Minnesota. We're looking at the Intermountain West with really heavy snow. Some spots could see up to 3 feet of snow. You add in the winds and we're going to see those blizzard-like conditions. Now, there is a warm side. We are watching the chance for severe storms once again, and unfortunately, it's a repeat performance where we're looking at the same spots that saw really devastating storms over the weekend. We're looking at strong tornadoes, long tracking tornadoes, and some of these could happen at night. Keep in mind, when we have nighttime tornadoes, it's doubly as dangerous. So these severe storms tomorrow will be from Texas and Michigan, blizzard-like conditions in the northern plains. This will move off to the east as we head towards Wednesday. So the strong storms targeting the Ohio Valley, the Great Lakes, and then lingering snow still across the northern plains. So we have a few days of really tough travel, if not impossible travel, as we head throughout Tuesday and also Wednesday. But this is the main concern, the biggest concern for tomorrow, because we are looking at, once again, really dangerous weather. 34 million people at risk tomorrow afternoon into the evening and nighttime hours for storms, strong storms, especially where you see the red shading, so portions of Iowa, Illinois, and Missouri. That is the likeliest spot. Also, you see another spot into portions of southern Missouri, Arkansas, and even Oklahoma. You could see some strong storms. Orange, yellow shading, too, is where we could see some storms as well. So dangerous weather here. We're looking at strong, long-tracking tornadoes possible, fast-moving storms, EF2 or greater. That's winds of 111 to 165 miles per hour. Could be stronger than that as well. And then, again, that nighttime tornado threat. On the cold side of this, we're looking at wind chills, bitter wind chills. We're looking at heavy, heavy snow. We're looking at those winds gusting over 60 miles per hour. That's going to create blizzard-like conditions and possible travel over the next few days, at least through Wednesday. And then these storms have a lot of moisture to them. It's pulling that moisture off the Gulf, so we could see some really heavy rainfall as well. Localized flash flooding. You don't want to drive in that as you head out on Tuesday and Wednesday. Where you see those brighter colors, the yellows and the oranges, that's where we're going to see the heaviest amounts of rain. The ingredients are in place. We had an active start to April. We had an active end to March. We have a really warm Gulf. That's the fuel for these storms. And then a vigorous jet stream. We saw storm after storm throughout the winter in the West, and we're going to continue to see this with really no break in sight. And that's why we're expecting the storms once again tomorrow. We'll keep our eye on it over the next 24 hours. Back to you.
Thanks, Michelle. Another rough week ahead. And still ahead on this hour, remember that Chinese spy balloon that had us all glued to our TVs to see what the heck was going on? Well, it was definitely spying on U.S. military sites and might have gotten a whole bunch of data. Plus, the Virginia teacher who was shot by her 6-year-old student is suing for $40 million while she says the school ignored multiple warnings. Remember that Chinese spy balloon that lumbered across North America 2 months ago? Well, it turns out that it might have gotten a lot of what it was looking for. Senior U.S. officials tell NBC News that the balloon gathered intel from sensitive military sites, soaking up all kinds of electronic data, and had the ability to send data back to Beijing in real time. And while many suspected that it could be steered remotely, we now know it was extremely agile. The source says sometimes it flew figure eights over military sites, figure eights from a balloon the size of 3 school buses. Joining us now from the Pentagon with more on this exclusive report is NBC News global security reporter Dan DeLuce. Dan, we've been hearing rumors of some of the balloon's capabilities for a while now, but now we're hearing it could speed up. It had some sort of self-destruct. This seems very different from something like a spy satellite. What else have we learned?
I think the key here is that originally the Biden administration maintained that really this balloon couldn't have picked up that much intelligence because the Chinese already have satellites in space, and because the U.S. took measures, basically the implication jammed that balloon and prevented it from collecting much valuable information. But now this new reporting we have is suggesting that that balloon was able to pick up electronic signals from some sensitive military sites, eavesdropping, et cetera, and then be able to send that back to China in real time. Now, the Pentagon today at a press conference was not ready to confirm this. They say that the FBI is still assessing that debris from the balloon that was shot down eventually, and that they're still looking at those pieces, that equipment, and trying to figure that out. But still a lot of questions about this balloon, what it was able to do, what the U.S. was able to prevent it from doing. And then, of course, there's still fallout here because we still don't have a meeting that was planned before the balloon flew across the U.S. The Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, was planning to travel to Beijing. It was a really important meeting to try to lower the temperature between these two superpowers, and there's still no firm plan to get that meeting back on the calendar.
And Dan, this looked like a weather balloon. I mean, it was white. It could have been painted blue. Were they trying to hide in plain sight here, or was this just something that we missed?
I think it was certainly something we missed initially, in the sense that there were previous flights, both during the Biden and the Trump administration. The key here, though, unlike a weather balloon, it's much larger, and it's at a very high altitude, higher than planes fly. We're talking 60 to 80,000 feet. And that actually makes it harder to detect because most of our satellites, much of our radars are focused on airplanes and missiles at a lower altitude. And so this does kind of end up hiding in plain sight, and it was missed initially. Now, they say they were tracking it as it was approaching Alaska. It crossed into Canada, and then it started maneuvering over these military bases in the continental U.S. And there are still questions, as we know, about why it wasn't shot down at the beginning or earlier. The White House says they didn't want to endanger anyone on the ground because it was so large. But, of course, the members of Congress are questioning that line of argument.
And let's not forget the fighter jets that shot down 4 objects in total. What do we know about the other 3 objects?
Well, those objects all turned out to not be Chinese spy balloons and were essentially harmless items. We haven't gotten a full accounting yet, but I think what happened was there was so much concern after that massive spy balloon was flying across the U.S. I think they became maybe overly vigilant, and they then looked at their procedures and looked at their tactics and their radars, and they decided we can't be going around with fighter jets shooting down weather balloons or weather-type airships. So that's what happened on those strange incidents. At the moment, yes, there are not fighter jets shooting down any more balloons.
That's such a bizarre moment in history. NBC's Dan DeLuce, thanks so much. And the first-grade teacher in Virginia shot by one of her students is now suing the school officials for $40 million. Abigail Zwerner was shot back in January in a case that drew national attention. And now it seems that 25-year-old teacher wants to draw more attention to the school district. She claims the school district ignored a number of warning signs on the day that shooting took place. Here's what one of her lawyers said this morning on the Today Show.
Now the allegations are, and we believe the facts will support the fact that they knew that they had 3 complaints, and then eventually a teacher comes down there and says one of the students has actually seen the gun. At that point in time, you have a ticking time bomb in the school, and the school failed to do anything about it.
Joining us now is NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalas. Danny, I want to get your take on something else that the lawyer said to our Savannah Guthrie about the school's possible defense. Take a listen.
Is it your understanding that the school board is going to say, this is part of the job of being a teacher? You assume the risk of being shot by your first grader?
That's correct. That's what they've maintained up until today, that is just part of the job. It's an assumption of the job that a first grade teacher is going to be shot by their own student, a 6-year-old. That is unacceptable. That's outrageous. And that's not what happened here.
Danny, part of the job, do you think that's going to hold up, that an elementary school teacher should possibly expect to be shot at as part of a job?
No, but it's pretty common for defendants in civil cases to raise what are called affirmative defenses. And the general rule is use it or lose it. In other words, you have to shotgun out all of these affirmative defenses, anything you can think of, because if you don't raise it immediately early on in the case, you could lose it later on. Now, is it likely that if this case ever gets to trial, which itself is not likely, but if it does, that there will actually be someone testifying that these first grade teachers, they assume the risk that their children will bring guns to school? No, that would be a devastating trial strategy. But at this early stage of litigation, it's not uncommon for defendants to assert sometimes even silly-sounding defenses because it's just so ingrained in lawyers' heads that you have to put it on the paper in the pleading because you don't want to be caught later on having not asserted it and then having lost it. As crazy as it sounds at the outset, you can always retract it later.
So you think this might not even make it to trial?
No, as a defense, no. I mean, I think the school has other more viable defenses as a school, and they generally do, particularly public schools. But that defense of assumption of the risk for a teacher is a real long shot. And I suspect that was the choice of somebody who just who stuck to the old rule of defendants, which is plead everything, assert every defense you humanly can, and then sort it out later or withdraw it later when it becomes apparent that it obviously doesn't apply. But even then, that may not happen until the eve of trial. And most of the time, nobody notices this in the run-of-the-mill case because nobody's scrutinizing what defendants are saying. Here, it brings into stark focus how silly some of these defenses can be.
From your perspective, what do you think the most damning facts of this case have been from what you've seen presented so far?
One word: notice. That's the key here. And notice is a legal term for saying that the defendant knew about this in advance and failed to do something about it. People are often surprised to learn that if something happens and the defendant had no reason to think it would happen, if this is something that nobody had ever had any warning signs about this particular child, or there had never been any kind of risk of violence at the school, gun violence or someone bringing a gun to school, then the school might argue, look, we can't fix anything that we didn't know existed. We can't prevent a hazard that we didn't have any notification or notice about. So the key in cases like this is always notice. What did the defendant know, and how far in advance did they know it, and could they have done something about it?
NBC's Danny Tavallos, thanks so much for joining us. And coming up, to the moon. NASA just revealed the astronauts for its Artemis mission launch day cannot come soon enough. But first, you got to see this. It is the sweetest art show in town. This Easter week tradition in Carroll County, Maryland, features dozens of sculptures made entirely of, those are peeps. From exotic animals to famous movie scenes, thousands of the marshmallow treats were used to build all of those creations. And whether you absolutely love them or you might be getting a little queasy just looking at them, this peep show is extremely cool. We'll be right back. And it's time now for some of the other headlines we're watching tonight. Corporate offices at McDonald's closed today as the company started laying off hundreds of workers. Employees will be notified virtually over the next few days if they've been affected by the cuts. Now, McDonald's says this restructuring is not a cost-cutting measure, but rather a move to improve innovation and efficiency. And a major merger between the worlds of wrestling and cage fighting was announced today. WWE is going to be joining forces with UFC to create a new publicly traded company. The deal values WWE at more than $9 billion and UFC at $12 billion. And it's not what you want to hear ahead of the summer, but gas prices could start ticking higher. That's because Saudi Arabia is cutting oil production by 500,000 barrels a day starting in May. That move could raise oil prices worldwide and strain ties with the U.S. And former Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson is jumping into the 2024 presidential race. He is now the latest Republican to take on Trump, and Hutchinson is even calling for Trump to drop out, saying the office is more important than any individual person. And if you haven't already, today is a good day to run over to Ben & Jerry's because it is free cone day. The Vermont-based ice cream company is giving out free ice cream at participating shops worldwide. If you want a little scoop, apparently you can get back in line as many times as you'd like. And the family of one of the University of Idaho students murdered last fall is honoring their son's memory in a beautiful way. We spoke with the family of Ethan Chapin on how they're making sure his legacy lives on.
That's amazing. It's Ethan smiling on us, right?
In Ethan Chapin's community, a new hope is blooming this spring that his memory won't be forgotten.
Ethan, he's a one of a kind.
Stacy and Jim Chapin are volunteering at the tulip farm where their son once worked before he was murdered, along with his girlfriend Xana Kernodle and two other University of Idaho students, Kaylee Gonzalez and Maddie Mogan, last November.
Ethan loved people, and he was an inclusive kid, and he loved a great adventure. I mean, Ethan was the kid that the rest of the kids would call and find out when he was on the work schedule because everybody wanted to work with Ethan. When this happened, the kids decided that they needed a way to honor him.
Ethan's fellow farmers dedicating a yellow and white tulip mix to him named Ethan Smile after one of his most memorable features.
I was one of the lucky kids that got to work on the tulip farm with him. He had the best smile. You couldn't see it and not just instantly smile back.
The proceeds from the bulbs going towards a foundation that Ethan's parents started in his name. It aims to provide scholarships for students who attended Ethan's grade school to go to the University of Idaho.
The tulip became something tangible and something that people grasped onto. We realized that by creating a foundation, we can give scholarships back to kiddos to be able to follow their dreams, and that's the best thing we could do in his honor.
The victim's family is waiting for their next day in court amid potentially troubling new revelations in the case against Brian Kohlberger, who's accused of murdering Chapin and the three other University of Idaho students. In a court filing last week, prosecutors disclosed that one of the officers on the case has been the subject of an internal affairs investigation. But with the next hearing still months away, a family sowing seeds to ensure that their son's legacy will flourish.
I miss him. I miss him a lot. That kid has touched more lives. We say in our family, if we touch as many lives as he did in his 20 years, this world would be a better place. He was an amazing kid.
An incredible family. The Chapins aren't able to speak about the case because of a gag order imposed by the judge, but prosecutors are working to build their case against Brian Kohlberger. And Brian Kohlberger has said through a former attorney that he thinks he's going to be exonerated. The next hearing is set for the last week in June. And a big night for college basketball. The men's title game tips off in a few minutes. On the women's side, the party has not stopped at LSU, which welcomed home their national champions earlier today. Take a look.
Ladies and gentlemen, here come your national champions, your Fighting Tigers of LSU.
There they are. LSU broke a tournament scoring record with 102 points against Iowa for the Tigers' first ever national title. The game itself broke viewership records. ESPN says almost 10 million people watched the game, the most ever for any women's college basketball game. And tonight, a new men's national champion will be crowned. UConn and San Diego State going head-to-head with the Huskies as the big favorites. Sam Brock is in Houston. Sam, real quick, UConn has had this dominant run, but what do you think? I know a lot of Aztec fans, and they do not seem too impressed.
I don't think you should be asking me what I think, because, Gadi, I think I had Duke in the finals or the Final Four, so obviously I wasn't even close. I am not a good prognosticator. I will tell you, yes, UConn is the overwhelming favorite. As you see folks behind me, Gadi, from San Diego State, who travels well, by the way, and UConn spilling into NRG Stadium. As far as just how much of a favorite, what the sort of magnitude of order is here, UConn has won its games. Margin of victory average 20.6 points per game in the tournament. The eye-opening point here, really, Gadi, was during a game against Gonzaga. That was the Elite Eight. They won by almost 30 points. Gonzaga is not a cream puff by any stretch of the imagination. This is a really powerful basketball program that routinely turns out NBA players. They crushed them. So San Diego State has an uphill battle against UConn tonight, Gadi.
San Diego State has an uphill battle, and yet I'm pretty sure it says that if your bracket is busted, you have a duty to root for the underdog. I mean, that's at least what my bracket says.
Everybody loves the underdog. I think San Diego State, a lot of people, Gadi, are counting them out. Let me give you some arguments as to why you think there might still be some belief on that. San Diego State has 3 or 4 players, core players, that are juniors and seniors. They've been together for years now. College basketball, there's so much turnover that you can develop chemistry, especially with guys like Matt Bradley, who have serious range. I think he hit 4 or 5 3-pointers last game. And obviously Lamont Butler, who hit that game winner, not even an offensive-minded player, but stepped up with the world watching him and hit a generational shot. You've got guys that have shown they're battle-tested. They played together for so long. The coach there, Brian Dutcher, too, has developed a really authentic relationship with those players. You can just see it in how they interact. So that may carry them, but the NBA guys are on the other side of the court. That's the UConn Huskies. And really, if you're betting on this game, you're betting UConn.
Sam Brock, I'll take that bet right after this. Let's text and figure it out. Thanks so much, brother.
I like it. See you, Gadi.
And up next, the future of everything, putting AI to good use, how NASA engineers are using the tech to create parts for spacecraft. Plus, we're going to introduce you to the group of astronauts getting ready to head to the moon. It is by far the coolest video the government has ever released. And today, NASA made their big reveal, naming the 4 astronauts it is sending to orbit the moon, going further than the human species has ever gone before. And I've seen a lot of trailers for movies, but the trailer that NASA just dropped to announce it, goosebumps. Check this out.
I'm Christina Cook. I'm a mission specialist.
I'm Jeremy Hansen. I'm a mission specialist. I'm Victor Glover. I'm the pilot. I'm Reed Wiseman. I'm the commander for the Artemis II mission to the moon.
To the moon.
To the moon. To the moon.
When I was young, I had a poster of the Earthrise picture, the famous picture that was taken on Apollo 8. And the fact that it was a human behind the lens that made that picture so profound and changed how we all thought of our own home was so amazing to me. The moon is not just a symbol of thinking about our place in the universe. It's not just a symbol of exploration. It's actually a beacon for science. It's a beacon for understanding where we came from.
You know, pushing ourselves to explore is just core to who we are. It's a part of being a human. That's our nature. We go out there and we explore to learn about where we are, why we are, understanding the big questions about our place in the universe. The exploration we're doing is the first few steps on the path of getting humans to Mars.
The Artemis campaign of missions have set such an ambitious goal for humanity that it's inspiring contributions from around the globe. Not just one nation is inspired and moved by this, but nations from around the globe are coming together. When I look at the Artemis II crew with Victor, Christina, and Jeremy, they want to go do this mission. They are keenly driven. They are humble to a fault. It is so cool to be around them. Artemis 2 is a huge mission, but I hope we will look back and realize that this was one tiny step in humans on Mars and a sustained presence on our moon. Start. Artemis 2 will be NASA's first crewed flight test of the Space Launch System rocket and Orion spacecraft around the moon.
To verify today's capabilities for humans to explore deep space
And pave the way for NASA's long-term human and scientific presence on the lunar surface.
we are ready.
We are going to the moon for all humanity. We are Artemis.
Oh, man, and we want to be Artemis, too. This is the second of 3 missions to start a moon base and prep for a mission to Mars. Artemis is scheduled to launch sometime next year, and all of it coming with a big new challenge, churning out rockets, churning out spacecraft and equipment faster than ever before. And now NASA engineers are turning to AI to help design and customize parts to respond to whatever's out there. Tom Costello has that story.
Here at the Goddard Space Flight Center outside of Washington, NASA research engineer Ryan McClelland is pioneering the use of artificial intelligence to design parts of the spacecraft of the future.
In science fiction, there's always thousands of people living in space and these huge structures in space. And what I'm hoping this enables is us to get there.
He calls them evolved structures.
A lot of people comment that they look like alien bones, and it's no coincidence that they look like bones because they develop the same way that bones develop.
The process starts with NASA leadership tapping McClelland's team to bring 2 components of a spacecraft together.
The first thing is to get the requirements, exactly what the part has to do. And then step 2 is to let the AI tool run and evolve over 30 to 40 iterations. And the next step is you make it with digital manufacturing.
The new technology allows NASA engineers to shorten the time it takes to develop specialty parts for spacecraft from months down to just days. Plus, the parts are lighter, stronger, and they use less material than most human designs.
This is a bracket for the EXCITE mission, which is a balloon experiment that goes up above most of Earth's atmosphere and actually looks at exoplanet atmospheres. So this is just sort of a simple bracket that holds a optical assembly to the back of a telescope.
Dr. Joe Hill-Kettle leads NASA's Engineering and Technology Directorate.
The most important thing to me is this is the future of NASA and the future of space flight and the future of space instrumentation.
She says the technology could be a vital resource for future missions.
If we're going to have a sustained presence on the lunar surface or eventually on the Mars surface, that the additive machine creation of these parts and the rapid turnaround would allow those folks to be able to perhaps fix things in real time, be able to build things off-planet.
But McClelland says aspiring engineers shouldn't worry. This technology will not completely replace humans, at least not yet.
Where it stands right now and where I see it in the near future is that it's kind of like a consultant that allows us to be more productive, but the human designer is still needed.
Artificial intelligence improving spaceflight, one piece at a time.
Tom Costello, thanks. And when we come back, it has been 50 years since the very first cell phone call was made, and boy, have these devices come a very long way. A phone in your pocket. A few decades ago, there is no way a brick could fit unless you were maybe wearing those Jinkos we could all wish we forgot about. But on this day, 50 years ago, the first successful cell phone call was made. And to celebrate that historic moment, NBC's Joe Fryer spoke to the man that made the first call. Take a look.
Long before sleek smartphones were practically welded to our hands, the technology looked like this. A brick is how some might describe it, though perhaps it's more fitting to call it a building block.
This phone, you can see how big it is. It weighed 2.5 pounds, would you believe?
Marty Cooper worked for Motorola back in 1973, overseeing the company's cell phone development division. So is this right here where history was made?
Right here. You know, who should I call? And it occurred to me that I would call my counterpart in the Bell system.
From this exact spot, exactly 50 years ago today, Cooper made the first mobile cell call, dialing up his rival at Bell Labs.
And I said, Joel, I'm calling you on a cell phone. A real cell phone, a handheld, personal, portable cell phone. you could tell that I was not averse to rubbing it in.
So you were bragging a little bit there.
I sure was.
Scenes like this are becoming commonplace.
It would be another decade before Motorola's Dynatac phone was on the market, selling for close to $4,000. With a price tag like that, they were initially toys for the elite, you know, Wall Street types. Well, those early models might now be characterized as clunky. Here's how they were described on Today.
It's small, it's smart, it's even sexy.
Over the years, as the phone shrank, interest grew, which meant fewer folks were clueless. Before long, the devices could be fiercely flipped.
Hello.
And eventually their skill set expanded well beyond mere calls with the BlackBerry and, of course, the iPhone.
Most of what you do is social media, texting, talking on the phone. The future of the cell phone is much more complicated and much more bright than that.
Cooper says this is just the beginning, that this technology will revolutionize education, healthcare, and so much more, which is why when people call him the father of the cell phone, well, it has a nice ring to it.
Joe Fryer, thanks so much. That does it for us tonight. I'm Gadi Schwartz. We'll see you tomorrow, but until then, stay tuned now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.